So, for today's movie review, I'll be reviewing the movie Godzilla. And if you're trying to figure out why there's a Godzilla movie coming out this year, 2014 is a special year for Godzilla since it celebrates his 60th anniversary. And also, the Japanese company Toho periodically retires the Godzilla character for about 10 years to renew future interest in the franchise. So, from 2004 to 2014, basically that was Toho's retirement for the character this time around. And yeah, you could say I had been waiting a decade for his return. I just get the unexpected bonus of the Godzilla movie being American and coming to American screens. Like, when I went to this movie, I just had such a weird feeling going into it, like, wow, I'm actually gonna see a legit Godzilla movie on screen. Has waiting a decade for this movie paid off? So, the plot of Godzilla is about this father and son duo that come together because of some event that happened like 15 years ago. And many people believe that it was a natural disaster, while the father believes that it was something else entirely. So they go to like this, what is believed to be an abandoned nuclear facility, and they discover that the government is hiding something. And one thing leads to another, giant monsters get unleashed. And the government believes that the only way they can fight monsters is to use a monster of their own named Godzilla. Now, what I like about this new Godzilla movie, I love the overall tone of the movie because it's very much like that of the original 1954 Godzilla movie, where instead of treating this like it's an alien invasion, they treat this like it's a natural disaster. I also like the cinematography of this movie because, like, watching a movie and you look at the landscapes, they look really great. And I also like the special effects in this movie. They bring Godzilla to life in a way that I don't think you could do with a costume. Even though I still prefer the guy in the rubber costume, this wasn't bad either. I also like the director decided to use for this movie. Now, if you're not familiar with Gareth Edwards, he's very new. Like, he's only directed one other movie, and that was his 2010 independent movie, Monsters. I reviewed this movie a while back, so if you're interested in seeing that review, I'll leave a link in the description. And I suggest checking out that movie too. See, with films like these, usually Godzilla fights against the military constantly. In this film, he doesn't really fight against the military that much. And also, you think Godzilla would be just by himself. Nope. He got some co-monsters along with him called M.U.T.O.s. I'll get to them in a little bit, but it was just nice seeing Godzilla on screen fighting against some other monsters. And speaking of the kaiju, I kind of like how the director made these things act throughout the entire movie. Because you could tell these weren't guys in rubber costumes. Like, you could tell that these things were giant animals reacting to their environment, how an animal would naturally react to its environment, and also react to any other organism within its territory. And yeah, that's pretty much what I liked about Godzilla. So, what I disliked about this movie, the first 20 minutes was a bit slow for me, but after 20 minutes the movie picked up, and there's a lot. Some parts of the movie kind of bugs me because they do a lot of teasing of Godzilla because you're sitting there and he doesn't appear till an hour in. I mean, granted, in some of the older Godzilla movies, he didn't appear till 45 minutes in, 20 minutes in, or an hour into the movie. But at least when he appeared, we saw him do shit. In this, when you first see him, it's like, oh, shit's about to go down, then it just cuts to a completely different scene, and it's just like, you fucking kidding me? I've been waiting for like an hour for that moment, and it just abruptly ends. Then I just question what happens during Godzilla during some of these scenes, because you got the Golden Bridge incident where you basically got Godzilla at the bridge going against the Navy for a bit. Then when the M.U.T.O.s shows up and does like an EMP burst, goes into the water, grabs like one of the boats and leaves, and it's just kind of like, wait, what was Godzilla doing during that? It's like, I want to know, like, why didn't Godzilla spot this thing and be like, oh, I'm gonna chase after you now? And of the three battles that happen in the movie, two of them happen off screen. That really bugged me. And the film was kind of like Godzilla 2000 all over again, where instead of Godzilla being the main focus of the movie, they decide to focus more on the enemy kaiju than they do Godzilla. But this is no Godzilla 2000, I'll say this much. Then also, if you want to see more kaiju action, I suggest watching GMK, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, Godzilla Final Wars, or Pacific Rim. You're not gonna have too many monster brawls in this movie. Now, as for the characters in the movie, you have Lieutenant Ford. Basically, he's a part of the U.S. Navy, and he's an EOD technician. Basically, the people who disarm bombs. And for the first half of the movie, I didn't think he was really that interesting. But when the second half of the movie came around, he was a bit more interesting, I'll say that much. Then you got Joe, who is Ford's father. And the archetype of character this guy fulfills is he's a scientist that everyone thinks is crazy because of some crackpot theory he came up with, which turns out to be true. And he doesn't really appear that much in the movie. And like Ford himself, I didn't necessarily like his character at first, but as the movie progressed, he got a bit more interesting. Then you got Ellen, Ford's wife. Basically, she's the normal person because you got everyone else who has basically had these encounters with these kaijus and have accepted that, oh, these are a thing. I just love her reaction to the situation because it feels generally legit because she's actually scared that there's a giant dinosaur fighting a giant bug. Her reactions are pretty good. I also really liked her character. Then you got Dr. Zirazawa. Basically, he's a scientist that's fascinated with the kaijus, and he doesn't really do much in the movie. Like, he's a cool character. It's just once the last half hour of the movie starts, he just disappears and doesn't show up till the very end of the movie. And I kind of felt that they built him up a lot, but they didn't do much with him. And yeah, that's really about it for the interesting human characters, at least. Then you got the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla. Basically, Godzilla in this film, he's like the Incredible Hulk in the Avengers movie, where you don't see much of him, but when you do, he's essentially the scene stealer. And this time around, he's more of the good guy, because most of the time, he's like the anti-hero, or sometimes good guy, or sometimes bad guy, but he's the good guy this time around. And what makes this Godzilla really interesting is he has gills. It makes a lot of sense because he spends most of his time in the ocean, but you never see any of the other Godzillas have gills. This one has gills, so it just makes this Godzilla more unique. And the only thing I can complain about the characters, aside him having a limited amount of screen time, is that from time to time he looked like a bear. Then again, from what I've heard, they kind of based him off both a Komodo dragon and a bear. Not really sure how that works. And for such a massive creature, he has such tiny eyes. And also, I kind of wish the dorsal fins on his back were just a bit bigger. But it was nice to see Godzilla return to the big screen, after all. Then you have the M.U.T.O.s. They're the enemy kaiju of this film, and basically, M.U.T.O. is an acronym for Massive Unidentified Terrestrial Organism. And the best way to describe these two monsters, you have the winged M.U.T.O., who's kind of like Megagurus, in a sense that they're both flying insect-like creatures that have the ability to emit an EMP-like burst. And you have the female M.U.T.O., who kind of reminded me of the Godzilla monster Orga, in terms of walking style, because she walks on her fists, or claws for fists, I should say. And also, she appears to be hunchback for most of the movie. The only thing I can really complain about these two monsters is that, in terms of their design,
they just looked a bit weird.
Because the director wanted to go with, like, oh, this is like man versus nature, like things, and these things are supposed to be like from Earth. They just looked a bit alien to me. Like, I think if they had a redesign, they could have been better, but they're alright for the most part. So, for my final verdict of Godzilla, basically, I like the cinematography, the acting, the action scenes, and it was just nice seeing Godzilla on the big screen again. My only dislikes of the film are that the first 20 minutes is a bit slow. You don't really see Godzilla that much, and they focus more on the enemy kaiju if anything else. And as for the characters, basically Ford and Joe at first weren't really that interesting, although they get a bit more interesting the more you get to know them. And Dr. Shirazawa, he's cool. I felt he didn't really amount to much. And as for Ellen, basically I liked her reactions to the entire situation because I felt she was more genuine than anything else. Her reactions to the situation were a little bit more legit. And Godzilla, he's pretty cool. I just wish he had a bit more screen time. And as for the M.U.T.O.s, they're not Godzilla's classic enemies, but I do welcome them. I just wish they had a better design because they just didn't feel natural, and they just reminded me of two other Godzilla monsters. So before my final rate, what does everyone else have to say about Godzilla? So, looks like Godzilla got generally positive reviews. So, for my final rating of Godzilla, I give Godzilla a 4 out of 5. So, now that this movie did well at the box office and they're now making 2 sequels, what would you like to see Godzilla fight in those movies? Would you like to see him fight against a new monster, one of the classic Godzilla enemies, or something else entirely? Personally, I would like to see Godzilla fight against the Avengers because that shit actually happened in the comics. I know it's not gonna happen in the movies, but I would at least like to see Godzilla fight against a group of superheroes made for that movie, or at least something like that. And yeah, happy 60th, Godzilla, and see you later.